We all do it. We silence our phones. We swipe away notifications. We tell ourselves, I'll deal with this later. But for Gladys Bennet, later never came. He ignored a single text message from his wife, Chloe, thinking it was just another argument, just another plea for attention. He didn't know that while he was sitting in a climate-controlled boardroom, sipping lukewarm water, his wife was typing her final words on this earth. He didn't know that by the time he finally unlocked his screen, the woman he loved would simply vanish. This isn't just a story about a missing person. It's a story about the secrets we keep, the signals we miss, and the terrifying reality that sometimes the silence is louder than the scream. The argument that morning hadn't been about anything important. It never was. Gladys Bennet stood in the kitchen of their sprawling colonial in Napier, Illinois, aggressively buttering a piece of toast. The scraping sound of the knife against the burnt crust was the only noise filling the room, other than the aggressive hum of the refrigerator. Chloe was leaning against the granite island, her arms crossed tight across her chest, protecting herself from the coldness radiating off him. She looked tired, not just sleep-deprived, though the dark circles under her hazel eyes confirmed that, but soul-tired. "You're not listening to me, Gladys," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a bad feeling. It's not just the car, it's everything. I feel like someone is watching the house." Gladys didn't look up. He took a bite of the toast, crumbs falling onto his pristine navy suit jacket. He brushed them off with an irritated flick of his wrist. "We've been over this, Chloe. We live in a gated community. We have a security system that cost more than my first car. Nobody is watching the house. You're stressed about the gallery opening. You're projecting." "It's not the gallery," she insisted, stepping closer. She reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. He flinched away, grabbing his car keys from the counter. "I have to go," Gladys said, checking his watch. A Rolex Submariner she had bought him for their 5th anniversary. It felt heavy on his wrist today. "The merger is happening at noon. I can't be late because you're having another episode of paranoia." The word hung in the air. Paranoia. It was a weapon he had used often lately. Ever since Chloe had quit her job at the hospital to pursue art full-time, Gladys felt she had too much time to think, too much time to invent problems where there were none. Chloe dropped her hand. The hurt in her eyes was immediate, sharp, and then, suddenly, dull. She retreated into herself. "Fine," she said softly. "Go. Good luck with the merger." He walked out the door without kissing her goodbye. The drive to the city was a blur of traffic and podcasts he wasn't listening to. His mind was replaying the fight, justifying his anger. "She knows how much pressure I'm under," he thought. "She knows that if Bennet & Co. doesn't land this deal, we're underwater." He arrived at the office at 8:45 a.m. The glass tower in downtown Chicago gleamed in the sunlight, a monument to success and stability. Everything Chloe was failing to provide him at home. His assistant Jessica was waiting with a double espresso and a tablet full of schedules. "Mr. Bennet, the lawyers are in conference room B. And your mother called. She wants to know if you're still coming for Sunday dinner." "Tell her yes," Gladys muttered, striding into his office. "And hold my calls." At 10:13 a.m., his phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. He glanced down. A text from Chloe. The preview on the lock screen cut the message off. All he saw was, "Gladys, please pick up. I think I made a mem." He sighed, rolling his eyes. "She thinks she made a mistake," he interpreted. "Probably about the fight. She wants to apologize. She wants to talk about her feelings again." He was in the middle of reviewing the liability clauses for the merger. He couldn't deal with an emotional post-mortem of their breakfast argument. Not now. He swiped the notification away. He flipped the phone face down. At 11:05 a.m., the phone buzzed again. Then again at 11:07 a.m. 2 missed calls. Chloe. Persistent, he muttered to the empty room. He picked up the phone, ready to text back something sharp. Something like in a meeting, stop calling. But just as his thumb hovered over the screen, Jessica knocked on the door. They're ready for you, Gladys. He dropped the phone back onto the desk. Coming? He walked out of his office, adjusting his tie, leaving the device behind. He felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a petty victory. Let her wait, he thought. Let her sit in the silence for a few hours. Maybe she'll realize she can't just demand my attention whenever she feels insecure. The meeting lasted 3 hours. It was grueling. The opposing counsel, a sharp-tongued man named Arthur Vance, tore apart their initial proposal. Gladys had to fight for every inch of equity. By the time they shook hands at 2:30 p.m., Gladys was exhausted but triumphant. The deal was done. He walked back to his office, loosening his tie, a grin spreading across his face. He wanted to call someone. He wanted to celebrate. He reached for his phone. The screen was black. Dead battery. Damn it, he hissed. He plugged it into the charger and waited for the Apple logo to appear. When the screen finally lit up, a cascade of notifications flooded in. Emails from the team. A text from his gym buddy. A reminder about the dentist. But nothing new from Chloe. No angry follow-up texts. No, why are you ignoring me? No passive-aggressive emojis. Just the text from 10:13 a.m. and the 2 missed calls. Curiosity, mixed with a sudden, cold prickle of guilt, made him finally open the message he had ignored for 5 hours. He tapped the green icon. The thread opened. He read the full message. Gladys, please pick up. I think I made a mistake coming here. The blue van followed me. I'm at the storage unit on 5th. He's getting out. Gladys stared at the words. The air in the office seemed to vanish. The triumphant buzz of the merger evaporated, replaced by a dull roaring in his ears. The blue van. She had mentioned a blue van 3 days ago. She said it had been parked across the street from the house. Gladys had told her it was a contractor for the neighbors. He had laughed at her. He's getting out. Gladys looked at the timestamp. 10:13 a.m. It was now 2:45 p.m. He hit the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hi, you've reached Chloe. I'm probably painting or running errands. Leave a message. Her voice was cheerful. Normal. A recording from a life that existed yesterday. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. His thumb hovered over the Find My app. He tapped it. The map loaded, the little circle spinning, searching for her location. Location not found. Last seen, 10:15 a.m. near West 5th Street, Public Storage, 2 minutes after the text. Then, nothing. Gladys grabbed his jacket, his keys, and sprinted out of the office. Jessica tried to ask him about the press release, but he pushed past her, his face pale, his eyes wide with a terror he couldn't yet name. The drive from downtown Chicago to the storage facility on West 5th usually took 40 minutes. Gladys made it in 22. He drove like a madman, weaving through the afternoon traffic, honking at pedestrians, risking his life and license. Every time he stopped at a red light, he pounded the steering wheel, screaming at the uncaring windshield. Pick up, Chloe. Pick up, pick up, pick up. Why was she at the storage unit? They rented a small unit there for old furniture and some of Chloe's larger canvas supplies, but she hadn't been there in months. Why go today? Why after the fight? I think I made a mistake coming here. Had she gone there to hide? To get something? To leave him? No. The text didn't sound like a breakup. He's getting out. Gladys screeched into the parking lot of the storage facility. It was a desolate place. Rows of corrugated metal doors painted a peeling orange, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The office at the front was dark. The manager was out to lunch or gone for the day. Gladys's car skidded to a halt near the gate. He punched in his access code. The gate rattled open, agonizingly slow. He didn't wait for it to finish. He squeezed his Mercedes through the gap, scraping the side mirror. He drove to Row D, Unit 404. Their unit. The aisle was empty. The wind blew a stray plastic bag across the asphalt, making a scratching sound that sounded like footsteps. He parked the car and jumped out. "Chloe!" he shouted. His voice cracked. "Chloe!" Unit 404 was closed. The padlock, a heavy-duty master lock, was hanging open on the latch. She had unlocked it. But she hadn't locked it back. Gladys ran to the door. He grabbed the handle and heaved it upward. The metal door rolled up with a thunderous crash that echoed through the empty facility. He braced himself for what he might see. A body. Blood. But there was nothing. Just old boxes. A broken lamp. A stack of Chloe's old art portfolios from college. Everything looked undisturbed. The dust on the floor was thick, except for the footprints. Gladys knelt down. In the layer of grey dust coating the concrete floor, there were marks. Small sneaker prints. Chloe's Nikes. They walked into the unit, towards the back, where a stack of boxes sat. Then there were other prints. Large. Heavy boots. The tread was deep, aggressive. The boot prints didn't walk in. They started near the door and scuffed heavily toward where Chloe's prints were. And then there were drag marks. 2 long, sweeping lines through the dust, as if heels were being pulled backward. Gladys scrambled backward, falling onto his calm, his breath coming in short, hyperventilating gasps. No. 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 He looked around the unit wildly. In the corner, near the drag marks, something bright caught his eye. He crawled toward it. It was her phone. It was smashed. The screen was shattered into a spiderweb of glass, the metal casing bent as if it had been stomped on by a heavy boot. And next to it lay a scarf, a red silk scarf with a floral pattern. Gladys picked it up. It smelled like her perfume, vanilla and jasmine. It was the scarf she had been wearing this morning, the one she had wrapped around her neck when she told him she was scared. "I feel like someone is watching the house." "You're paranoid," he had told her. Gladys clutched the scarf to his chest, sinking to his knees on the dirty concrete. He let out a scream of pure, primal anguish that tore at his throat. He had ignored her. He had silenced her. And now all he had was a broken phone and a red scarf. He fumbled for his own phone, his fingers shaking so badly he could barely dial. He hit 911. "911, what is your emergency?" "My wife," Gladys sobbed, the tears finally spilling over, hot and blinding. "My wife has been taken. I found her phone. There was a man in a blue van." "Sir, take a deep breath. Where are you?" "The storage unit's on 5th. Please, send someone. I think I killed her." "Sir, did you harm your wife?" The operator's voice sharpened. "No," Gladys yelled. "No, I ignored her text. I ignored her and now she's gone." As he waited for the sirens, Gladys looked down at the scarf in his hand. Tucked into the fold of the silk, caught on a loose thread, was a small piece of paper. He pulled it out. It was a receipt. Not from a store. It was an ATM slip from a bank in the bad part of town. Dated 9:45 a.m. today. Withdrawal, $5,000. Why did Chloe withdraw $5,000 an hour before she disappeared? And who was she paying? A police cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing silently, bouncing off the orange metal doors. Gladys stood up, wiping his face. He knew how this looked. The fight. The large withdrawal. the open storage unit, the husband who didn't answer his phone for 5 hours. He wasn't just a grieving husband anymore. As the officer stepped out of the car, hand resting cautiously on his holster, Gladys realized the truth. To the world, he was the villain of this story. The interview room at the 12th District Precinct didn't look like it did in the movies. It wasn't dark and smoky. It was blindingly bright, lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes that made Gladys Bennett's headache pound behind his eyes like a sledgehammer. He had been sitting there for 3 hours. No phone, no watch. Just a metal table bolted to the floor and a two-way mirror that reflected his own disheveled reflection. He looked like a wreck, suit jacket rumpled, tie gone, eyes bloodshot. He looked guilty. The door buzzed and swung open. Detective Amanda Miller walked in. She was a sharp-featured woman in her late 40s, wearing a nondescript grey blazer and an expression of permanent exhaustion. She held a thick file folder under her arm and a styrofoam cup of coffee in her hand. She didn't offer one to Gladys. She sat down opposite him, placing the folder on the table with a heavy thud. "Mr. Bennett," she began, her voice deceptively calm. "Let's go over the timeline again." "I told you," Gladys rasped, his throat dry. "I was at work. I was in a merger meeting from noon until 2:30. You can check with my assistant. You can check with the lawyers." "We did," Miller said, flipping open the file. "Your alibi for the afternoon holds up. You were indeed in a boardroom, making millions of dollars while your wife was being abducted." The way she said it, cold, clinical, made Gladys flinch. "But," Miller continued, leaning forward, "it's the morning I'm interested in. The neighbors reported a loud argument at 7:30 a.m., screaming. Something about paranoia. She was scared," Gladys pleaded. "She told me she felt watched. I didn't believe her. I thought she was stressed about her art. I dismissed her." "You dismissed her," Miller repeated, writing something down. "And then, according to your phone records, she called you twice, texted you, and you ignored it all. For 5 hours. I was angry." Gladys slammed his hand on the table. "That doesn't make me a murderer. I ignored a text message. I didn't drag her out of a storage unit." Miller stared at him, unblinking. She pulled a photograph out of the file and slid it across the table. "Recognize this?" Gladys looked down. It was a grainy photo taken from a security camera at a gas station down the street from the storage facility. It showed a blue van, an older model, Ford Econoline, rusted around the wheel wells. The windows were tinted dark. "That's the van," Gladys whispered. She mentioned a blue van in the text. "We ran the plates," Miller said. "Stolen 2 days ago from a construction site in Gary, Indiana. But look at the driver." Gladys squinted at the photo. The driver was a silhouette, barely visible through the glare of the windshield, but he was wearing a hat, a baseball cap with a specific logo on it, a stylized hawk. Gladys's blood ran cold. That's the logo for the Naperville High football team," he stammered. "My alma mater." "And the team you booster for," Miller noted. "You donate $10,000 a year to that program. A lot of people have that hat, Gladys. But it's an interesting coincidence." She pulled another photo. This one was from inside the storage unit. "We processed the unit, Gladys. We found the phone, we found the scarf, but we found something else you didn't mention." She slid a photo of a painting across the table. It was a canvas, propped up against the back wall of the unit, hidden behind the boxes Gladys had looked at. It was a portrait of Gladys. But it wasn't flattering. It was painted in jagged, violent strokes of red and black. In the painting, Gladys's mouth was sewn shut with wire, and in the background, standing in the shadows behind painted Gladys, was a figure, a woman. She had no face, just a blank oval. But she was holding a knife against Gladys's neck. Gladys stared at the image, horror rising in his throat. He had never seen this painting. Chloe painted landscapes, serene lakes, abstract flowers. She didn't paint this. "Your wife had a lot of anger, Mr. Bennet," Miller said softly. "Art is expression. What was she expressing here? Did she feel silenced by you? Threatened?" "I never hurt her," Gladys whispered. "I loved her." "Then why did she withdraw $5,000 cash this morning?" Miller dropped the bomb. "And not just this morning. We subpoenaed her bank records an hour ago. Chloe has been withdrawing $5,000 in cash every Friday for the last 6 months. That's nearly $120,000. Gladys, where is that money going?" Gladys sat back, stunned. I handle the finances. I would know." "She had a separate account," Miller said, "under her maiden name, Chloe Davis. Opened 6 months ago. You didn't know?" Gladys shook his head, the room spinning. His wife, the woman who texted him about grocery lists and Netflix shows, had a secret account, a secret recurring payment, a secret dark art style. "We're going to find her, Mr. Bennet," Miller said, standing up. "But right now, you look like a husband who pushed his wife too far, and maybe she pushed back. Or maybe you hired someone to make sure she stopped spending your money." "Am I under arrest?" Gladys asked, his voice hollow. "Not yet," Miller said, opening the door. "But don't leave town, and stay away from that storage unit." Gladys walked out of the precinct into the cool night air. The city noises were loud, abrasive. He felt naked. He hailed a cab, his hands trembling. He wasn't the killer. He knew that. But for the first time, he realized he didn't know who the victim was either. Who was Chloe? And who was she paying $120,000 to? The house was too quiet. Gladys stood in the foyer of their home, the silence pressing against his eardrums. Usually, the house smelled like Chloe's oil paints, or whatever scented candle she was burning. Lavender, sandalwood. Tonight, it smelled like stale air and cleaning products. He poured himself a scotch, neat, and downed it in one burn. The police thought he did it. The withdrawal history looked like blackmail, or worse, a hitman down payment. But if Chloe was paying someone, why was she the one who was taken? He couldn't sleep. He paced the living room, checking his phone every 30 seconds, hoping for a text, a ransom call, anything. Nothing. At 2 a.m., driven by a restless energy, he walked down the hallway to the sunroom. Chloe's studio. He hadn't been in here in months. He usually avoided it. The smell of turpentine gave him a headache. He pushed the door open. Moonlight filtered in through the skylights, illuminating the easels and tables cluttered with tubes of paint and brushes. He walked to the center of the room. It looked chaotic. Canvases were stacked everywhere. He started flipping through them, looking for more dark paintings like the one Miller had shown him. Landscape. Landscape. A bowl of fruit. A study of the garden. Normal. Everything was normal. So where did the sewn mouth painting come from? He moved to her desk in the corner. It was covered in sketches. He rifled through the papers. Underneath a stack of charcoal drawings, he found a notebook. A small black moleskin. He opened it. It wasn't a diary, it was a log. Nov 3rd. Drop off at minimal. Blue coat, no eye contact. Nov 10th. He asked for more. I told him no. Nov 17th. The price went up. I have to sell the jewelry. Gladys's heart hammered against his ribs. He asked for more. Blackmail. Someone was blackmailing Chloe. But who? And for what? Chloe was a suburban housewife. Her biggest secret was that she sometimes smoked a cigarette when she walked the dog. He turned the page. The entries stopped a week ago. The last entry was circled in red ink. Deck 12th. It ends. I'm meeting him. I'm taking the insurance. The insurance. Gladys looked around the room. What insurance? He started tearing the room apart. He pulled books off the shelves, overturned jars of brushes, ripped the backing off canvases. Where is it? He hissed to himself. Where is the insurance? He paused, breathing hard, his hands covered in charcoal dust. His eyes landed on her working easel. There was a painting on it, covered by a drop cloth. He walked over and pulled the cloth off. It was a painting of their house. But it was odd. The perspective was warped. It focused heavily on the old oak tree in the backyard. The tree where they had carved their initials when they first bought the place. In the painting, the knothole of the tree was painted in hyper-realistic detail, almost 3D, and there was a small, golden arrow painted subtly in the leaves, pointing directly at the knothole. Gladys stared at it. The insurance. He didn't think. He ran. He burst out the back door into the backyard. The night air was freezing, biting through his thin dress shirt. He didn't care. He sprinted across the dew-soaked lawn to the massive oak tree near the property line. He reached the tree, his breath clouding in the air. He found the knothole. It was deep, dark. He reached his hand inside. Spiders? Snakes? He didn't care. His fingers brushed against something cold and plastic. He grabbed it and pulled. It was a waterproof bag, a heavy-duty Ziploc wrapped in duct tape. Gladys tore the tape off with his teeth. Inside was a flash drive and a single photograph. He held the photograph up to the moonlight. It was a picture of a young woman, maybe 20 years old. She was smiling, holding a baby. Gladys didn't recognize the woman, but he recognized the baby. The baby was wrapped in a blanket with a very specific embroidery. Bennett Family Reunion, 1998. Gladys's knees gave out. He slid down the trunk of the tree, sitting in the wet grass. That blanket. His mother had knitted those for all the grandkids. But Gladys and Chloe didn't have children. They had tried for years, but it never happened. He looked closer at the woman in the photo. There was a familiarity in her eyes, the shape of her nose. She looked like Chloe, a younger, different version of Chloe. Gladys clutched the flash drive. Chloe had a child she had kept secret from him for their entire 10-year marriage, and someone knew, the blackmailer, the man in the blue van. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind him. Loud, deliberate. Gladys froze. He wasn't alone in the backyard. He slowly turned his head. Standing at the edge of the woods that bordered their property, about 50 feet away, was a figure. A man, wearing a heavy coat and a baseball cap, the cap with the hawk logo. The man wasn't moving. He was just watching Gladys, watching him find the insurance. Gladys scrambled to his feet, clutching the bag. "Who are you?" he screamed into the night. "Where is she?" The man didn't answer. He raised a hand. In it, he held a phone. He tapped the screen. Gladys's phone, in his pocket, buzzed. The man turned and walked calmly into the woods, vanishing into the darkness. Gladys ripped his phone out of his pocket. A new text message from unknown ID. "You found the deposit. Now, bring me the rest of the interest, or she dies at dawn." Gladys looked at the time. 4:15 a.m. Dawn was in 2 hours. He looked at the flash drive. He had to know what was on it. He had to know why his wife's secret child was worth killing for. He ran back toward the house, the darkness feeling like it was closing in on all sides. The game had changed. It wasn't about a missing wife anymore. It was about a hidden life, a secret child, and a husband who had 2 hours to solve a 10-year-old puzzle. Gladys sat at his kitchen table, the laptop screen casting a ghostly blue pallor over his face. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that felt like a countdown. His trembling fingers plugged the flash drive into the USB port. A folder popped up. No password, just a single video file named For Gladys. He clicked play. Chloe appeared on the screen. She was sitting in her car, the same car found abandoned at the storage unit. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smudged. The timestamp on the video was 9:50 a.m., 20 minutes before her text to him, 23 minutes before she vanished. "Gladys," she began, her voice shaking. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could fix it myself. I thought if I just paid him, he would go away. But he's greedy. And he knows." She took a deep breath, looking into the rear-view mirror, checking for threats. "You know the blanket in the photo? The Bennett family reunion, 1998. You always told me that year was a blur for you, that you spent that summer in Europe." Gladys nodded at the screen, tears pricking his eyes. He had spent that summer in France. It was his gap year before college. "You didn't spend the whole summer in France, Gladys," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You came home for 2 weeks in July. You were young, stupid, and drunk at a party. You don't remember her. A girl from the wrong side of the tracks. Her name was Amanda. She passed away 5 years ago." Gladys froze. A vague, hazy memory of a bonfire party near the lake clawed at the back of his mind. "Amanda had a baby, Gladys, a boy. She didn't want to ruin your life, the golden boy of the Bennett dynasty. So she kept him. She raised him alone. But when she died, he went through her things. He found a diary. He found out who his father was." Chloe held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was a birth certificate. "Father, unknown. Mother, Amanda Miller." Gladys gasped. "Miller, the detective. Detective Amanda Miller." No, that was impossible. The detective was too old. Amanda Miller was a common name. "His name is Caleb," Chloe continued. "He found me 6 months ago. He didn't want a father, Gladys. He wanted revenge. He thinks the Bennetts, your family, paid his mother off to stay silent and let her die in poverty. He's been bleeding me dry, threatening to go to the press, to ruin the merger, to destroy your reputation." She wiped a tear. "But today he changed the deal. He doesn't want money anymore. He wants to meet you. He wants you to admit what you did. I'm going to the storage unit to meet him. I'm scared, Gladys. He's unstable. If I don't come back, check the tracker I sewed into the hem of the red scarf." The video cut to black. Gladys stared at the screen, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. A son. He had a son. And Chloe had been protecting him from this secret for 6 months, paying for his sins with her own safety. The scarf. Gladys grabbed the red scarf from the table where he had left it. He ran his fingers along the hem. There, a small, hard lump. He ripped the silk open. A tiny coin-sized GPS tracker fell out. It was a generic brand, the kind you use for luggage. He grabbed his phone and downloaded the app listed on the tracker's casing. He entered the serial number. A map loaded. A red dot blinked. It wasn't at the storage unit. It wasn't at the police station. It was moving, fast, southbound on I-55. Gladys didn't call the police. He couldn't. If Detective Miller saw this, if the police found out the victim was paying hush money to the husband's secret illegitimate son, the narrative would spin out of control. They would think Gladys and Chloe were in on it together, or that Gladys killed her to silence the boy. He had to get to her first. He ran to his car. As he reversed out of the driveway, his phone buzzed. "Detective Miller. We found the van, Mr. Bennett, abandoned by the river. No sign of your wife, but we found blood in the back. A lot of it. You need to come in." Gladys threw the phone onto the passenger seat. "Not yet," he growled, flooring the accelerator. He followed the dot on the tracker app. It led him out of the suburbs, past the city limits, into the industrial wasteland of Joliet. Old refineries, rusted bridges, endless fields of corn stubble. The dot stopped. Gladys zoomed in on the map. Location: the old ironworks mill, an abandoned factory complex. He killed his headlights as he approached the turnoff. The moon was obscured by clouds, pitching the world into darkness. He drove down a gravel road, the tires crunching loudly in the silence. He saw a vehicle parked near the main hangar. Not a blue van. A black SUV. Gladys parked his car in the tall grass, grabbed a tire iron from his trunk, and crept toward the building. The massive sliding doors of the mill were rusted open a few feet. Flickering light spilled out from inside. Gladys squeezed through the gap. The smell of rust and damp earth was overpowering. In the center of the cavernous room, illuminated by a portable construction light, were 2 chairs. In one chair sat Chloe. She was tied up, her head drooping. She looked unconscious. Standing over her was a young man. He looked to be in his early 20s. He was wearing the baseball cap with the Hawk logo. He held a gun loosely in his hand. He was pacing, shouting at someone on the phone. "She's out cold! You said he would be here! I don't care about the money anymore. I want him to look me in the eye." Gladys stepped out from behind a pillar. "Caleb!" His voice boomed, echoing off the metal rafters. The boy spun around, raising the gun. Gladys raised his hands, dropping the tire iron. "I'm here," Gladys said, walking slowly into the light. "I'm here." Caleb's face was twisted in rage, and looking at him, Gladys saw it. The jawline, the brow. It was like looking in a mirror from 20 years ago. "You," Caleb spat, "the great Gladys Bennett." "Let her go, Caleb," Gladys said, his voice steady despite the terror gripping his throat. "This is between you and me." "She lied to me," Caleb screamed, gesturing with the gun. "She said you were a good man. She said you didn't know about me. But you knew. My mum wrote letters. She sent them to your office." "I never got them," Gladys said earnestly. "I swear to you, Caleb, I never knew you existed until 10 minutes ago." "Liar!" Caleb fired a shot into the ceiling. Dust rained down. Chloe stirred, groaning. "Gladys!" she rasped, lifting her head. Her face was bruised. "I'm here, honey," Gladys said. He looked at Caleb. "Who is on the phone, Caleb? Who are you talking to?" Caleb looked at the phone in his hand. A look of confusion crossed his face. He said he was your lawyer. He said he could help me get what I was owed." Gladys's blood ran cold. "My lawyer." Suddenly, the massive metal doors behind Gladys groaned and slid open further. Headlights blinded them. A car drove slowly into the mill, a sleek silver sedan. It stopped. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, clapping his hands slowly. He was wearing a pristine suit, a camel haircoat draped over his shoulders. It was Arthur Sterling, Gladys's partner, the man who had been in the trenches with him during the merger, the man who stood to make $20 million if the deal went through and lose everything if a scandal broke. "Bravo," Arthur said, his voice smooth and echoing in the vast space. "A family reunion. How touching." "Arthur," Gladys whispered. "What is this?" "You have messy loose ends, Gladys," Arthur sighed, pulling a silenced pistol from his coat. "When this kid started sending letters to the firm addressed to you, my secretary intercepted them. I thought, this could be a problem. But then I realized, it could be an opportunity." "You used him," Chloe spat, straining against her ropes. "You fed him lies about Gladys to make him hate him." "I needed leverage," Arthur shrugged. I needed to make sure Gladys was distracted during the merger negotiations, so I could slip in the clause about the offshore accounts. But now the merger is signed. And you three, you're just liabilities. Arthur raised his gun, aiming not at Gladys but at Caleb. Close the loop, Arthur muttered. Bang! Caleb crumpled to the ground, clutching his chest. No! Gladys screamed, rushing forward. Arthur turned the gun on Gladys. Don't be a hero, Gladys. You're just a widower who tragically died trying to save his wife from a deranged stalker. The press will eat it up. He aimed at Chloe. The sound of the gunshot that killed his son, a son he had never known, rang in Gladys's ears, shattering his reality. Caleb lay still on the concrete, blood pooling around the hawk logo on his cap. Time seemed to slow down. Arthur was turning the gun toward Chloe. She was tied to the chair, helpless, her eyes wide with the realization that this was the end. Gladys didn't think. He didn't calculate. He lunged, not at Arthur. He was too far away. He lunged at the portable construction light standing on a tripod between them. He tackled the stand, sending the blindingly bright halogen lamp crashing toward Arthur. The bulb shattered on the concrete with a loud pop, plunging the mill into near-total darkness. The only light came from the headlights of Arthur's car, which were pointing away from them, creating long, distorted shadows. Damn it, Arthur shouted, firing blindly into the dark. 2 bullets pinged off the metal pillars near Gladys's head. Chloe, Gladys whispered, scrambling on his hands and knees across the dirty floor. Chloe, where are you? I'm here, she whimpered from the darkness. Gladys found her chair by touch. His hands fumbled with the ropes. They were tight, zip ties. He couldn't untie them. The tire iron, he muttered. I dropped the tire iron. Gladys, he's coming, Chloe hissed. They could hear Arthur's footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching on the glass of the broken light. You can't hide in here forever, Gladys, Arthur taunted. I know this place. My father owned it. There's only one way out. Gladys felt around the floor. His hand brushed against cold metal. The tire iron. He grabbed it. He jammed the tapered end into the zip ties binding Chloe's wrists and twisted with all his strength. The plastic snapped. Chloe was free. Run, Gladys whispered in her ear. Get to the car. Go. Not without you. She grabbed his arm. I have to buy you time, he said, pushing her toward the shadows. Go. Chloe hesitated for a split second, then scrambled away into the darkness toward the sliver of moonlight at the bay doors. I hear you moving, Chloe. Arthur's voice drifted from the left. He fired again. A spark erupted off a machine press near where she had been. Gladys stood up. He clutched the tire iron. He was 40 years old, an executive who spent his days typing emails. Arthur was a hunter, a man who went on safaris. But Arthur had killed his son. Gladys picked up a loose bolt from the floor and threw it hard to the right, hitting a metal drum. Clang! Arthur spun and fired at the sound. Gladys charged. He didn't scream. He ran silently, guided by the muzzle flash. He slammed into Arthur just as the man turned back. They crashed onto the concrete floor. The gun skittered away into the dark. Arthur was strong. He drove a knee into Gladys's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Gladys gasped, doubling over. Arthur punched him in the jaw, a blow that made Gladys's vision swim. You always were soft, Gladys, Arthur sneered, standing over him. He kicked Gladys in the ribs. Business is survival of the fittest. Arthur turned, looking for the gun. He spotted it, gleaming in the reflection of the car's tail lights. He walked toward it. Gladys tried to get up, but his body wouldn't obey. His ribs were on fire. He watched Arthur bend down to pick up the weapon. Arthur's hand closed around the grip. He stood up, turning back to finish Gladys off. And then, a roar, an engine revving to the red line. Arthur looked up, blinded by high beams. Gladys's Mercedes, battered, scraped, and missing a mirror, came hurtling out of the darkness. Chloe was behind the wheel. She didn't brake. She slammed into Arthur with a sickening thud, pinning him against the side of his own silver sedan. The metal crunched. Arthur screamed, a short, sharp sound that was instantly cut off. Silence returned to the mill. The engine idled, a broken hiss of steam escaping the radiator. Gladys dragged himself up. He limped toward the cars. Chloe stumbled out of the driver's seat. She was shaking uncontrollably. "Is he?" she asked, her voice tiny. Gladys looked. Arthur was pinned. He wasn't moving. The gun lay on the ground, useless. Gladys walked over to Chloe and wrapped his arms around her. They collapsed together, sliding down to the cold floor, holding each other in the wreckage of their lives. "We have to call the police," Chloe sobbed into his chest. "We will," Gladys said, stroking her hair. He looked over at the body of Caleb, the son he never got to save. "But first, I have to say goodbye." Gladys walked over to the boy. He knelt down. He closed Caleb's eyes. He took the red scarf, the one that had started this entire hunt, and gently placed it over Caleb's face. "I'm sorry," Gladys whispered. "I'm so sorry." Sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens this time. Detective Miller must have tracked the phone or the gunshots reported by neighbors. As the blue and red lights began to flash against the walls of the mill, Gladys took Chloe's hand. They were alive. But they were different people now. The silence between them was gone, replaced by a truth too heavy to carry, but one they would have to carry together. The silence in the old ironworks mill was heavier than the gunfire had been. It was a suffocating, ringing silence, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine and the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of fluid leaking from the smashed radiator of Gladys's Mercedes. Gladys sat on the cold concrete, his back against a rusted pillar. His ribs throbbed with every breath, a sharp reminder of Arthur's kick. But the physical pain was distant, muted by shock. Chloe sat beside him, her knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in Gladys's torn suit jacket. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the space where the headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating the wreckage of the night. 10 yards away lay the body of Arthur Sterling, the man who had been the best man at their wedding, pinned against the silver sedan that was meant to be his getaway car. And further back, almost lost in the shadows, lay Caleb. Gladys couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He looked so young now that the rage had left his face. The hawk logo on his cap was stained dark, but his expression was peaceful. Gladys felt a grief so profound it threatened to crack him open. He hadn't known Caleb existed until 2 hours ago, and now he would never know him at all. He would never know his favorite color, his laugh, or if he really hated the Bennetts, or just wanted to be seen by one. "Gladys," Chloe whispered, her voice cracking. "Do you hear that?" Gladys lifted his head. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder, a rising chorus of judgment coming for them. "They're coming," Gladys said hoarsely. He reached out and took Chloe's hand. Her fingers were ice cold, covered in dust and dried blood. "Whatever happens next, we tell the truth. All of it. No more secrets. Not one." "He was your son," Chloe said, a tear finally escaping and cutting a clean line through the dirt on her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Gladys. I thought I was protecting us. I thought—" "Shh," Gladys squeezed her hand. "You saved my life. You saved me from a life of lies. We're going to deal with this." The blue and red lights swept across the high windows of the mill, fracturing the darkness. Tires crunched on gravel. Doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. "Police! Show us your hands!" Gladys stood up slowly, helping Chloe to her feet. They raised their hands, united in the blinding glare of the tactical flashlights. Detective Amanda Miller was the first through the door, her weapon drawn, her face a mask of grim determination. She saw Arthur. She saw the gun. She saw Caleb. And then she looked at Gladys, battered, bloody, but standing tall beside his wife. "Holster your weapons," Miller barked to the officers behind her. She walked up to Gladys, her eyes scanning the scene, piecing together the narrative of betrayal and survival in seconds. "I told you to come to the station, Bennett. You never listen." "I had to pick up my wife," Gladys said, his voice breaking. He looked toward Caleb's body. "And I had to meet my son." 6 months later. The world had moved on. That was the strangest part about tragedy. The rest of the world refused to pause for it. The scandal of Bennett & Co. had burned white-hot for weeks. The corporate killer, the tabloids called Arthur Sterling. The story had everything. A secret love child, a frantic kidnapping, a duel in an abandoned factory. Gladys and Chloe had been scrutinized, deposed, and eventually exonerated. The forensic evidence backed their story perfectly. It was self-defense. It was survival. But the flashbulbs had eventually faded. The reporters stopped camping on their lawn, mostly because they didn't have a lawn anymore. Gladys sat on the wooden porch of a small A-frame cabin in Whitefish, Montana. The air here was crisp, smelling of pine needles and snowmelt, a stark contrast to the sterile air conditioning of his old office or the metallic tang of the mill. He held a steaming mug of coffee, watching the mist roll off the lake. His phone sat on the railing, screen dark. He was different now. The man who had obsessively checked his emails during dinner, who had measured his worth in billable hours and merger acquisitions, was gone. That man had died in the mill alongside Arthur. The door behind him creaked open. Chloe stepped out, wrapping a thick wool cardigan around herself. She looked healthier. The dark circles were gone, replaced by a dusting of freckles from the mountain sun. She was painting again, not the dark, claustrophobic images of her trauma, but vast, open landscapes, canvases filled with air and light. "You're up early," she said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Couldn't sleep," Gladys admitted. "I was thinking about the date." "I know," Chloe said softly. "It's his birthday today." Caleb would have been 24. Gladys nodded, staring at the lake. He had resigned from the firm the day after the investigation closed. He had liquidated his assets, the stocks, the bonuses, the blood money Arthur had helped generate. He used it to establish the Caleb Miller Foundation, a trust designed to provide legal aid and college tuition for foster children who had aged out of the system. It was the only way he knew how to be a father to a ghost. His phone buzzed on the railing, a short, sharp vibration. Gladys flinched. The reflex was still there, the sudden spike of cortisol, the dread that bad news was incoming. He hesitated. For a long time, he hadn't touched the phone at all, leaving it in a drawer for days. "Are you going to get that?" Chloe asked. Gladys picked it up. It was a text message, unknown ID. His thumb hovered over the screen. The last time he received a text from an unknown number, it was a death threat. He took a breath and tapped the notification. "Mr. Bennett, my name is Jenna. I'm Amanda's sister, Caleb's aunt." Gladys's breath hitched. He read on. "I saw the news about the foundation. I wanted you to know. Caleb was angry, but he was a good kid. He kept a picture of you in his wallet. He told me once that he hoped you were a good man, so he wouldn't have to hate you. You were late, Gladys. Too late for him. But what you're doing now, he would have liked that. Thank you for the headstone. It's beautiful." Gladys read the message twice. The tightness in his chest, a knot that had been there for half a year, began to loosen. He wasn't forgiven. He knew that. You don't get forgiveness for 20 years of absence. But he was acknowledged. He typed a reply. His fingers were steady. Thank you, Jenna. If you ever have stories about him, I'm ready to listen, whenever you're ready. He hit send. Then he looked at the device in his hand, the black mirror that had dictated his life for so long, the device that had almost cost him his wife because he couldn't be bothered to look at it, and then almost cost him his soul because he couldn't look away. Everything okay? Chloe asked, watching him closely. Yeah, Gladys said, looking up at her. He saw the way the morning light caught her hair. He saw the patience in her eyes. He realized he had almost missed this. He had almost missed her. Everything is okay, he repeated. I'm just done with this. Done with what? The noise. Gladys pressed the side button on his phone. The screen prompted him. Slide to power off. He didn't hesitate. He slid his thumb across the glass. The screen swirled with a shutting down animation, and then it went black. He set the phone face down on the railing and turned his chair to face his wife. So, he said, a genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in months. Tell me about the painting you're working on. The blue one. Chloe smiled back, a radiant, surprised look. You really want to know? It's a long story. I have time, Gladys said, leaning back and crossing his legs. I have all the time in the world. The wind rustled through the trees, a soft, whispering sound. It was the sound of the present moment. And for the first time in his life, Gladys Bennett was actually there to hear it. Thank you for listening to The Husband Ignored His Wife's Message. This story is a reminder that while we can't change the past, we can decide where we focus our attention today. Gladys learned that lesson at a terrible cost. If this story moved you, or if it made you want to hug your loved ones a little tighter, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And I have a question for you. What is one notification you wish you had never ignored? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be reading them. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Ironic, I know, so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, put the phone down and live in the moment. Goodbye for now.